Most night photography relies on what's already there, but what if you could create your own moonlight? This centuries-old church is isolated, it's quiet, and tonight we're going to light it from above. Not with a strobe, not with flash, using a cheap drone, some creativity and a plan. Sometimes a single photograph can shift how you see light. A couple of years ago, I came across the work of Reuben Wu, a British photographer who used a drone with mounted lights to illuminate alien-like landscapes in the American Southwest. The images were surreal, but the technique was surprisingly grounded. He wasn't just revealing the landscape, he was shaping it with light, and that inspired me to start experimenting. I produced these images last year whilst working out in the American deserts. These scenes weren't lit by the sun or any fixed light source. The light you're seeing here came from a drone hovering in place, shining down like a controllable moon. And that's the beauty of this method. Unlike traditional light painting where you move a flashlight around from ground level, often creating weird highlights and unnatural shadows, lighting from above creates something much more believable, more atmospheric, more like something you'd actually see at night. When the light falls from above, angled gently, mimicking the way the moon might, it wraps around the subject, feeling far more believable. And that's why I'm heading out tonight. I'll be using the DJI Mini 4 Pro with 2 micro LEDs mounted underneath. These lights are tiny, weighing almost nothing, but powerful enough to sculpt a scene when paired with long exposures. You don't need any exotic gear for this either. I'm going to be using a Fuji X-T5, but any camera with manual control and a tripod will work. No fast lenses, no high ISOs. We're stopping down for some depth, letting time do the work instead of light sensitivity. We'll start with a daytime scout to plan the composition, then return after dark to start painting the scene, one static exposure at a time. This church feels like it's been long forgotten, tucked away deep in the Kentish Downs, just outside the village of Chollock. The kind of place where you step out the car and immediately feel like you're stepping back in time. It's remote, which makes it perfect for what I've got in mind for tonight. There's no one to disturb, no nearby houses, just the sounds of the wind rustling in the trees. Before we come back in the dark, I want to really take my time and have a look, because night photography isn't just about technique, it's about intent too. You don't want to be figuring out your composition in the dark with your torch in one hand and an RC controller in the other. So I've brought my camera along this afternoon, the same one that I'll be using this evening, with the intent of finding one strong composition that I can focus my attention on tonight. Because I intend to use the sky from Blue Hour, it means that I can't then move the tripod, because when we start light painting, I need to make sure that the images line up. The plan is to take a sequence of exposures that will stack together to make a multi-layered image. So I've settled on my final composition for tonight. I've placed the church centre of frame as this is our main subject, and I've bookended it with the trees to the left and to the right and the gravestones in front. And what I'm hoping is that when we put the drone up in the air, it's going to give us a very different look and feel to what we're seeing right now. I'm using PhotoPills here to see where the sun is setting. It's dropping low behind the trees to the west. That really helps because it means the skies will darken much more quickly over the church once we start light painting. Once I found my composition, the last thing I like to do is to be able to put the drone up and measure the height of the various things that we're going to actually illuminate. So if we allow approximately 20 metres for the church and 30 metres for the trees, that should be very comfortable clearance and a good starting point. So I've made a note of those heights in my phone. All that's left now is to head home and come back out closer to sunset. So I've returned to the church and the conditions have stayed favourable. It's become a little bit more overcast, but the wind has dropped and I think we've got a great chance of being able to get some great photography tonight. It's about 30 minutes from sunset and I just absolutely love this time of day. The light is soft, it's calm, there's no need to rush, And honestly, it's a good time to just lean into it. So I'm just going to sit back, relax, watch it all unfold and wait for blue hour to arrive before we start doing any work. So I'm just going to sit back, have a cup of tea, let the place settle, let myself settle and get myself in the right frame of mind to be able to photograph and do justice to this place tonight. So often as a landscape photographer, I'm rushing, finishing a hike, trying to get somewhere in time for sunset or sunrise. So it really makes a pleasant change to be able to just stop, take it all in and enjoy the moment. I'm trying to imagine and envisage how the light's going to look when we start to paint with it, especially when it tries to pass through the tree canopies to the floor below and what impact that's going to have on our final image. So the camera's all set up and locked down, same composition as we had before, so now it's just a case of waiting patiently for the light to disappear. So it's well and truly into the blue hour now, and I'm looking to just take that first shot to be able to make sure that we've got some detail in the sky and some colour in the sky. So I've got my camera set to f5.6 ISO 800 and I'm looking for a sweet spot, somewhere where we can get clean images with a low enough ISO but with enough depth of field to make sure that everything is sharp from front to back. And we can see there that we've got the last of that blue sky from quite a long exposure, and I'm looking for exposures between 20 and 30 seconds to find that sweet spot so that we're not here all night and we're able to capture and gather enough light. So I'm going to take off now, and immediately we can see where the light is just interacting with our image. It's dark and it's subtle, but it is there. So I'm going to go ahead and start by putting my drone into position, and we can see on the live display how that is now starting to light up our foreground subject. So I'm going to put it about here, and I'm going to take a test exposure. I'm going to put that on to 15 seconds and let's see how that looks. And already we can see how the light is just illuminating the top of the church. Brilliant. I'm now going to continue to bring this down, and I'm going to keep building the scene like this shot by shot. Now you might have noticed that the drone is actually in our composition, but I'm not too worried about that because we're going to clone that out afterwards when we blend them. Now I'm just methodically working my way through the scene, lighting each part of the image so that I've got all the details and the data later on to decide what it is that I want to use and what it is that I want to remove. Now earlier on we took a height measurement, and we know that to clear the trees safely we need to be at around about 30 meters. So I'm going to take my drone up to 30 meters, and I'm going to now know that I can safely take it over the trees, and this then just becomes trial and error. So I think now that I've got the drone in place for illuminating the trees on the left hand side, I'm going to need to take my exposure time up because it's quite dark over there and the trees are not as reflective as the church is. So I'm going to take my exposure time up. So I'm just building this out image by image, and I don't expect you to sit here through 25-second exposures. It'll get quite boring quite quickly. So I'm going to edit this together so that we get to the end nice and quick.
Battery level is low.
Okay, so as you heard there, battery ran out, had to land. Just going to switch it over and get the drone back up. Okay, I'm back. Let's get the drone up in the air and continue. So I had to go around the front of the camera because this light was blinding me and I couldn't quite see the positioning of the drone relative to the tree on the right hand side. So I'm hoping that's positioned perfectly now to be able to just light up this right hand tree. So if you're curious how I navigate the drone in the dark, it has two green lights on the back of it, and that allows me to be able to always work out its orientation relative to me. So I'm finished now. The little LED lights finally gave out their power and I've got everything out of them that I can possibly get. So I'm going to head back home. Shooting in the dark is never easy, but this time it actually went smoother than I expected. Planning ahead took most of the guesswork out of it. We had a solid composition, we knew roughly how high to fly the drone for each section, and we had a lighting plan mapped out before we even arrived. That made a big difference. The hardest part? It becomes about repetition. Lighting one section, checking the shot, adjusting position, then doing it again for the next part of the frame and the next. You can't rush it. If something's off, you either live with it or go back out and start again. So it's not complicated in terms of gear or technique. It just takes time and a bit of discipline. But when everything lines up, it's well worth it. Let me walk you through my process for importing and stacking the images using a combination of Lightroom and Photoshop. I start by making sure that all of my images are imported into Lightroom. I will typically use a dedicated catalogue for each project I'm working on. Once I have my images in the catalogue, I will go through each individual frame, deciding whether to keep it if it adds something to the composition or to remove it. In this case, this is a duplicate of a previous exposure, so I don't need it. Once I've selected the files I want to work with, I will open those as layers in Photoshop. We have around 20 files, so it will take a few moments for them to all load in and stack. Because the camera was locked down on a tripod, there's no need to align the individual frames. I begin by selecting all of the layers and then I change the blending mode to lighten. We can now see where they've all been stacked. Once we apply this technique, we can see that the drone appears in the image multiple times. The next stage is to go through and remove the drone light. We do this one frame at a time to see where the corresponding light source is coming from. Then using a brush in black, we simply paint it out of our composition. We do this for all of the layers until we're left with a base image that we want to start working with. Until all the layers are blended, it's difficult to know what an individual image is bringing to the scene or not. So the next stage is to go through and turn each layer on and off and see what it contributes to the final image. For this frame, I like the light it's adding to the church, but I don't like the effect it's having on the sky. I begin by creating a layer mask and invert it so that we're not seeing any impact. And then I will gently, using a white brush, at about 50% opacity, paint in the light back onto the church. This frame is lighting up the midsection of the church, but we can see it's too bright. So I'm going to add another layer mask to this frame, and then using a brush, I'm going to gently paint out some of that light, taking away some of its intensity till it feels like it's evenly illuminated, coming from the top down into the midsection. And finally, I'll do it for the next frame so that we get this continuity and the light feels like it's very evenly illuminated across the whole of the front of the church. I will continue to work my way through all of the frames, applying the same techniques. If a frame brings nothing to the composition, I will then just disable it. Once I'm happy with my base edit, I'll flatten the image, discarding any hidden layers, save it and import it back into Lightroom. So alternatively, I could have stayed in Photoshop and continued to work on the file there, but for the simplicity of this tutorial, I've brought the file back into Lightroom and I can apply some simple edits from Lightroom itself. So the changes I applied were subtle, but overall I'm very happy with the final edit. This kind of photography is always a bit of an experiment. You never quite know what you're going to get until it all comes together. And I think it worked. It's not the fastest way to shoot, nor the simplest, but using a drone like this, treating it as a lighting tool instead of just a camera platform, opens up all kinds of possibilities. If you've tried light painting like this, or you're thinking about giving it a go, then please leave me a comment. I'd love to hear your approach to it. And if this is your kind of project, your thing, thinking creatively, solving photography problems, then maybe think about subscribing too. There's plenty more content on the way.